Okay, so update video on my my server here, my Threadripper. It's a Threadripper 2950X, and it's running in an Azra board. It's an X399 Gaming Professional. Great board. A lot of PCIe X 16 slots, and then it does have some other expansion. It's got a 1 and a 4 times. But I've got the 2950X in here. That's 16 cores, 32 threads, and I run it at like confirmed like 4.2 gigahertz all the time. So it works pretty good. Those are all the cores there. They're running in Unraid right now, and it's got 64 gigs of RAM in it. I'm only running 2 video cards now. I really only run two gaming VMs, and those are 1080 Ti's. And I've had people ask me why I run an SLI bridge on them when they're in different VMs, and that's because my primary VM, Ariel, this one here, I actually can run it in a couple different script modes. So it's always the same hardware and the same install of Windows, but it runs in a different script, which I give it certain hardware. And when I run one VM as like a super VM, when I fire it up that way, it runs both 1080 Ti's in SLI, and I can use it in SLI. Or I can shut down that main script, and then I can run these 2 scripts where it fires it up, but with a little bit lesser hardware, and it fires up my other one as well, which I have as well. It's called Jasmine. So what I've got is the board, the X399 board here. It had 3 NVMe slots, which is great. So I have these two NVMe's that are 512 gig, and they're pretty quick. They were ADATA, and I'm trying to remember what, like they're an XPG, I can't remember what it was, but pretty quick, 3500 megabyte read and write speeds, and like you do get those, like that's what it seems to be coming in at. And then in my 3rd slot, I installed an Intel 660p. It's a 1 terabyte instead of 512 gigs. And the 1 terabyte I actually use as like a cache drive inside of, it's a little bit overkill, but inside of Unraid. And there's certain situations in which that cache drive is really handy to have. So like for a quick breakdown of all like the hardware in here, I have a bunch of hard drives, a lot of 8 terabyte hard drives, and they are in a 40 terabyte RAID array that is backed up. You can see it, it's here. So, and I'll actually go like main. You can see there's my RAID array and what's on it, 40 terabytes backed up. Well, not backed up, but parity protected there. So those basically run it, and then there's 2 4 gig hard drives too, 4 terabyte hard drives, and I run one of those out to each gaming VM for like older game installs and things like that. So quick breakdown, I give each of the machines 6 cores. My primary one I actually give 8 cores, 16 threads to. And it's my main workstation one. It does a little more. I run Plex on it because I've always just had a smoother experience with Plex on Windows, and it gives me that hardware acceleration off the video cards too for, you know, decoding and things. But I run it with 8 cores, 16 threads, and then on my second system that I've got over here, this one is 6 cores, 12 threads, and then that leaves me 2 cores and 4 threads for Unraid. Really all Unraid's doing these days is just calculating parity. It doesn't really do much more than that, just when, you know, I'm copying things to it, and I find that many cores is fine. I'm not really running Dockers, I guess is what I'm getting at. So in my setup, what I'm running, take a quick look at the pinning process, but that's what I've got. And as I was saying, I can run Ariel as one very mean machine with like a ton of cores. What does it have? I think it has 14 cores, 28 threads or something. So it's pretty powerful. And then you can see what Ariel gets for threads and cores. So back and forth. Right now I actually have Jasmine having a few more cores, and that was my primary gaming one. I run it on my 4K TV. So I just don't want to be like CPU bottleneck when I'm like, technically even in 4K gaming you never are. But in Final Fantasy I do find sometimes when I run that game with 8 cores, 16 threads, it does better than when it's just 6 cores, 12 threads. And I guess it's utilizing that CPU power. And then I've basically got it set up here that Unraid can use these. I do have a third VM that I run sometimes. Depends on what I'm doing, and you know, sometimes it's good to be behind a VPN and a VM for doing certain things. So sometimes I'll fire that one up and use it, but seldomly does third one run. In the past, I was running it with that 980 and trying to split up the cores more, but I'd find that when I tried to run all three machines and gaming at once, I was getting like micro stutters and hiccups, and it just wasn't as smooth. Best advice that I can give people for when I was doing it was your SATA controller can get saturated. Maybe not necessarily the drive, especially when you have different drives, when you start assigning drives to VMs, but like when I was running 3 VMs and I'm installing games to 3 different hard drives, we're just talking hard drives, I was doing 8 gigs at that time, 8 gig hard drives, but when I was installing to them, that would saturate out the controller, and I was getting Windows freezes and it wasn't working. And that's when finally, like down the road, I gave in there, and I actually have two controllers there. I can't remember what they are. People have asked me and I've linked them before, but I dedicate one of those out to each VM. So now I actually have controllers that handle the SSDs that are assigned to the VMs and the hard drives. And then I have the separate onboard 8-port one that runs the RAID array, and it runs really smooth. That got rid of one of my hiccups, one of my really big hiccups. And then another thing that I found that was really handy was an ls topo command that tells you basically each die, the cords that are on the die. It can tell you the memory channels that are attached to those die, which isn't really as important because you know, just in the way it splits it up. But one of the neat things is it shows you which PCIe lanes and which devices are plugged into which die. And you want to assign the same cores, because they're all like numbered, but you want to assign the cores and the die that are attached directly to that PCIe lane. Technically, you don't have to. It can actually pull off the other die, but then it's got to send it through the Infinity Fabric network that links the dies together. Well, that's fine, because the Infinity Fabric's so fast, it's great. But you know what? If you have 3 different video cards going and they're all on the wrong die, and that communication's going through the Infinity Fabric, it's very possible to like oversaturate that, and like it'll bog out. So you want to run your PCIe lanes directly to that CPU. So that CPU and video card and the chunk of RAM that's all like assigned to that VM is running just on that die. The other dies don't handle anything to do with that VM, don't pass information through anything else. And when you assign that properly, it can make a really big difference in the way how it performs. So one of the other things that I ran into was not having enough USB controllers, like actual controllers. So I do have 2 USB 3.0 controllers on the motherboard, and they're not bad, but I have an older Rift, and it actually takes 4 different sensors for room scale, and it works really well, but it takes a ton of USB bandwidth. So I ended up buying it's actually like a server grade, like USB 3 controller, but it has four separate controllers on it. It's actually, I don't know if we can see it, it's kind of below that video card, not quite, but it is there. There's a cable actually coming out of it. Anyways, it's there, and it has 4 controllers on it. And I can actually probably show it from the back, but here they are. Those are the 4 USB. So I can dedicate each one of those out individually. So I can give 2 to each VM. I can do whatever I want, but I actually just dedicate all 4 of those out to the VM that handles my my Rift, and it works really well. And then there's 3 USB controllers that are on the motherboard. 3 USB controllers, but 2 that are USB 3.0. And I give each one of those out to a VM, and then whatever I plug into it, when the USB controller is dedicated to it, it just automatically detects, drivers install, no issues. I don't have to shut down the VM and add a specific piece of hardware. I can just use those. And then that really helped with all my USB bandwidth issues. So now I can literally game on this unit here in like a AAA game, max frames, pushing it, CPU working hard. And then on this unit here, like my TV, when I have it on the TV, or it can go there, right? But I can run my VR system, and they don't interfere. Like, you can run them both, and they're not hiccuping. Next to no like hiccups like at all. Like, when it's all configured right, everything's done right, you can get rid of them. But it took me like months of like playing around with it and kind of like learning and tweaking and just like figuring out why things aren't running as smooth as, you know, what can be told. And I remember in like the Lance Tech Tip videos, there's a lot of tweaking and things like that involved. As like 6.8 comes, I think it's going to be a lot easier to do a lot of this stuff, especially like booting from NVMe drives and all sorts of things too, right? So as Unraid gets better, I think the experience will be better. But with everything that I've done up till now, it's gone really well, and the machine runs quite well. So just to talk a little bit more about it, I have it at 4.2 gigahertz, but it runs hot. Like, I've got a triple, like a 360 mil triple 120 rad up there with 3 120 fans there pulling or like pushing, and then I've got 3 above it as well. You can see they're here pulling, so it's got 6 fans on that. And when I start maxing out my cores, like, I'm still hitting like 90 degrees on the T junction or whatever, which is like on the die heads, the hottest die head, which is pretty hot. I don't really want them getting hotter than that, but like, I can go to 4.4, but then my temperatures start climbing even higher. I can't seem to get my voltages down and keep it without like having to go custom loop for, you know, pushing a system that hard, right? So 4.2 seems stable. I don't worry about it. And the temperatures normally keep under the 90 degree mark, so I'm fairly happy with that. But it's running pretty well. And looks like I just installed a couple games here. So I did Forza and Cyberpunk, and I ended up originally downloading them, and then what happens is they're on an SSD that's on this one as like a cache drive that runs for my downloading programs. And then when they complete, they send them over the network to my, let's see here, get this to fire up. Sends it over the network to my cache drive that's on Unraid, and then from there I was able to just install off the cache drive. I've got a 5 gigabit out of the Aurora, because that was built like onboard, and then Aurora being the Unraid server. And then I run 2 Intel NICs. Each one of them goes out to like, it was an Aquantia 5G that's on it. Then I have 2 like Intel 1 gigabyte ones, and I run each one of those out to the VMs. But I can saturate both those 1 gig connections coming off that NVMe drive without like breaking a sweat. Like, 1 gig is what, like 113 megabyte a second. It's not really all that fast. So, but I was just installing it that, and it did max it out pretty well. But yeah, very smooth system. It's been running pretty darn well. Yeah, I've had no issues with it lately. What tends to happen with me, I think, is I get too comfortable, things are running too smooth, then I read something and I want to try it. And that's when I end up kind of messing up some, you know, a thing that works, that's good and just works. And I just need to keep with it, spend a little more time just using it to game instead of experimenting on it all the time. But I sure do like Unraid. It does a really good job of running these VMs and handling, you know, just a big array that can hold all my data, all the information that I want to hold and I want to keep, and keep it safe. It's a great program, works really well. No complaints about it.